Vinod Bihari Ju ki jai. Maran Mohan Ju ki jai. Nityal Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatar Ashata Shishmar Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Gosvāmī Mahārāja Śrīla Gurudev ki jai. Nityal Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatar Ashata Shishmar Bhakti Vedanta Vaman Gosvāmī Mahārāja ki jai. Nityal Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatar Ashata Shishmar Bhakti Vedanta Swami Mahārāja Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai. Nityal Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatar Ashata Shishmar Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Gosvāmī Mahārāja ki jai. Nityal Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatar Ashata Shishmar Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Gosvāmī Prabhupada ki jai. Nityal Pravishta Maha Bhagavat Śrīla Gorksharas Babaji Mahārāja ki jai. Nityal Pravishta Śrīla Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki jai. Nityal Pravishta Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Śrīla Jagannath Das Babaji Mahārāja ki jai. Śrī Rupa Nugagoriya Guru Varga ki jai. Śrī Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Śrī Jeev Gopala Bhattadash Raghunath Shara Goswami Prabhu ki jai. Śrī Swarup Damodar Rāya Rāmānanda Śrī Gaur Parshad Vrinda ki jai. Namachay Śrīla Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Kshetra Mandala Gaura Mandala Vraja Mandala Mathura Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Sarva Abhishta Pradati Giriraj Maharaj ki jai. Shri Radha Kunda Shamakuni Munaganga Tulsi Bhakti Devi ki jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Śrī Rāmānanda Rai ki jai. Tadiya Shubha Tirubhav Titi ki jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai. Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Hare Krishna Raj Bhuvan Yadav ji and Rohit Radha Krishnan Prabhu and Kishore Prabhu. Hari Bol everybody. And everybody else watching. So I am now using my mobile data, which isn't always stable. So I'm going to keep on checking back to make sure that it's still connected. Please let me know though if it ever starts getting choppy. Yeah. I think the problem before though when I went live was in my room I don't get a good connection here, but on this side of the building I do get a better connection, I think. So we'll see. Okay, audio is perfect. Great. Hari Bol Yashoda Didi. Alright, so today is the auspicious disappearance day of Śrī Rāmānanda Rai. And so I'm going to read from Srila Bhakti Ballabha Tīrtha Gosvāmī Mahārāja's book, Śrī Gaur Parashad Charitavali. And in English it's Śrī Caitanya and his Associates. And if you would like to get this book, you can get it on the Kindle store. They just made a new edition. Yeah, so that's what I'm reading from. Hari Bo Madhavi Didi, Dandavat Pranam. Alright, so Śrī Rāmānanda Rai. Priya Narma Saka Kashchir Arjuna Pandavorjuna Militva Samabhud Rāmānanda Rāya Prabhu Priya Atorada Krishna Bhakti Prema Tattvadikam Kriti. 1 second. Why is it not moving? Rāmānanda Gora Chandram Pratyavarnayarat Anvaham Lalitetyahurekeyat Tareke Nanumanyante Bhavanandam Pratipraha Goroyatvam Pritapati Gopyarjuniyaya Sardham. Sorry. Eki Bhuya Pipandava Arjuno Yad Raya Rāmānanda Ityahuruttama Arjuniya Bhavaturnam Arjunopi cha Pandava Eti Parmottara Khande Vyaktameva Virajate Tasmare Tatrayam Rāmānanda Rāya Mahāshaya. Haribo Ganga Mataji. Pranams. Okay, so this is from those verses that I read are from Gaur Ganadishtipika. And the translation is, there are two Arjunas in Krishna Lila. One is a Priyanarmasaka and Vraj, and the other is one of the Pandavas. These two combined to become Mahaprabhu's dear companion Rāmānanda Rai. Rāmānanda was very knowledgeable in the teachings of loving devotion to Shri Radha Krishna, which he describes to Gaurachandra on a daily basis. Some people say that Rāmānanda Rai was Lalita Saki, while others do not. Mahaprabhu himself told Bhavananda Rai that he was Pandu, the husband of Kunti, and the father of the Pandavas. Mahaprabhu told Rāmānanda's father, Bhavananda Rai, that he was Pandu, and the husband of Kunti, and the father of the Pandavas. Padma Purana states that the Pandava Arjuna became the Gopi Arjuniya. Thus, the most aware say that in Rāmānanda Rai, all these three personalities are combined. That's Gaur Ganodeshtipika 120 to 124. As stated in these verses from Gaur Ganodeshtipika, some people hold that Rāmānanda Rai was an avatar of Lalita. Some others are of the opinion that he was Vishaka. That's what I'm used to hearing, that he was Vishaka. In his commentary on Sri Caitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 8, verse 23, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes, the love that awakened in Rāmānanda and Mahaprabhu when they met was the same as the love that Vishaka had for Radha and Krishna in Vraj, and that which Radha Krishna had for Vishaka. Thus, it is clear that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur saw Rāmānanda Rai as Vishaka. Rāmānanda Rai, the Lord's 3.5 most intimate associates. And a quote from Caitanya Charitamrita. The Lord accepted that Shikimahiri's sister was one of Radha's friends. In the entire world, there were only 3.5 devotees who were as worthy. They were Swarup Damodar Gosvāmī, Rāmānanda Rai, and Shiki Mahiti. Shiki Mahiti's sister was the half-person. That's Caitanya Charitamrita, Antya Lila, chapter 2, verses 105 to 106. Haribo Sudevi Didi. Rāmānanda's social status. Rāmānanda Rai's father was named Bhavananda Rai. He was born in a family of the Orissan Karana caste. Bhavananda Rai was previously King Pandu. He had 5 sons, of whom Rāmānanda Rai was the eldest. The other 4 brothers were Gopinath Patanayak, Kalanidhi, Sudhanidhi, and Vaninath Patanayak. The Lord states in Caitanya Charitamrita, you are Pandu himself, and your wife is Kunti. Your 5 sons are the 5 Pandavas. That's from Sri Caitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 10:53. Manohar Rai, a descendant of Rāmānanda Rai, has written his family's history. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswāmī Thakur has summarized some of the details of this account in his Anubhashya. Orissan society considers the Karana community to be part of the Shudra caste. Rāmānanda Rai was born into this community. Nevertheless, though he was considered by society to be a Shudra by birth, he was a de facto Brahmana. Indeed, as a Vaishnava Paramahansa, he was a spiritual master to the Brahmanas. By Krishna's will, the creator Brahma himself appeared in an outcast family as Haridas Thakur in order to show that one's family and one's race have absolutely no importance. Born as a Muslim, Haridas Thakur only enriched Lord Gauranga's pastimes. And now we're reading a quote from Chaitanya Bhagavat. Haridas Thakur is born in a low caste family on the Lord's desire in order to show that caste and class have no importance at all. All the scriptures say that a devotee of Vishnu, though born in a lowly family, is still worshipable by all. What will one's caste do for one born in a high caste who does not worship Krishna? He will go to hell in spite of his high birth. Haridas Thakur took a low birth just to bear witness to these scriptural statements. It's Chaitanya Bhagavat Adi Khanda, chapter 16, verses 237 to 240. A Vaishnava is beyond the qualities of the material nature. Anyone who considers a devotee in terms of his birth or race is destined for a hellish existence. This is a famous verse. Arche Vishnu Shiladhir, Gurushu Naramatir, Vaishnave Jati Budhir, Vishnur va Vaishnavanam, Kalimala Matane, Padatirtembu Buddhi, Shri Vishnur Namni, Mantre Sakala Kalushahe, Shabda Samanya Buddhir, Vishnu Sarveshwareshe, Taritara Samadir, Yasya va Narakisa. Anyone who considers the deity of Vishnu to be nothing but stone, the Guru to be an ordinary human being, or the Vaishnavas to be a member of a particular caste or race, who takes the holy water which has washed Vishnu or the Vaishnav's feet, and who has taken that water which has washed the Vishnu's or the Vaishnav's feet, which can destroy all of the sins of the age of Kali, they consider that to be ordinary water, or one who thinks that the name of or mantra of Vishnu, which destroys all evils, is the same as any other sounds, or one who takes Vishnu to be the same as anything other than him, that person suffers hellish existence. That's from the Padma Puran. Bhavananda Rai made his home in Brahmagiri or Alanath, about 12 miles west of Puri. Rai Rāmānanda was King Prataparudra's governor in Vidyanagar, and according to some opinions, he was one of his ministers. According to the Bhajan Nirnay, Rāmānanda Rai was a disciple of Raghavendra Puri and the grand disciple of Madhavendra Puri. Sarvabhauma tells the Lord about Rāmānanda. The Lord took sannyas in the month of Magh and arrived in Puri during the month of Falgun. After celebrating the Dol Yatra in Puri, Mahaprabhu delivered Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya in the month of Chaitra. In the month of Vaishak, he set off on his pilgrimage to South India. Though Mahaprabhu had decided to travel alone, Nityananda Prabhu convinced him to take a servant, Krishnadas, as a traveling companion. As he was leaving, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya gave the Lord 4 kopans and a bahirvas, and he requested him to visit Rāmānanda Raya on the banks of the Godavari. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, "My Lord, you must fulfill this request of mine. In the town of Vidyanagar, on the bank of the Godavari, there is a responsible government officer named Rāmānanda Rai. Please do not neglect him, thinking he belongs to a Shudra family engaged in materialistic activities. Please take my word for it that you should meet him without fail. If anyone is fit to associate with you, it is he. No other devotee can compare with him in the knowledge of divine sentiments. He has attained the highest limits of learning and is experienced in the science of devotional sentiments. If you converse with him, you will recognize his exalted character. When I first met him, I could not understand that everything he said and did was transcendental. I made fun of him simply because he was a Vaishnava. By your mercy, I can now understand the truth about Rāmānanda Rai. In talking with him, you will also acknowledge his greatness." That's Caitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 7:61-67. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada has commented as follows, and on this verse. On verse 63 of this same chapter. To superficial understanding, Rāmānanda Rai was not a sannyasi wearing a loincloth. In common understanding, those who are courtiers engaged in government service are materialistic, but Rāmānanda Rai was in fact a learned person who was a de facto sannyasi, a perfected human being. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had previously been able to recognize his natural qualities as a Vaishnava, even though he himself was not a Vaishnava at that time. When he took to the grace of the Lord, he reconsidered his opinion of Rāmānanda and realized the extent of his qualifications, calling him an Adhikari Rasik Bhakta, the most highly qualified authority in the matters of devotional sentiment. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was the avatar of Brihaspati and the court pundit of King Prataparudra. He was so learned that even though he was a householder, he had sannyasis as his disciples. Nevertheless, he had been unable to recognize that Caitanya Mahaprabhu was the Supreme Lord himself, nor was he able to identify Ramananda Rai as his most intimate associate. If he was unable to do so, then how much more difficult it would be for others. No one is able to understand the glories of the Lord and his devotees without being blessed by their mercy. Now here's a quote from Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is the previous chapter, so Madhya Lila chapter 6, verses 82 to 83. The process of inference is of no value for understanding the nature of the Supreme Lord. Without the Lord's mercy, no person can come to know him. One to whom the Lord gives even a slight drop of mercy is able to understand his nature. Just checking the connection. Haribo Gopikanta Prabhu. Mahaprabhu meets Ramananda. Mahaprabhu set off to the south, blessing the inhabitants of the lands by bestowing devotion to Krishna on them. He visited Kurmastan, delivering the Brahman also named Kurma, and giving everyone the order to preach devotional service to Krishna. He saved Vasudev Vipra, and then went on to Singhachalan. So then Mahaprabhu saved Vasudev Vipra and then went on to Singhachalam, where he danced before the deity of Jiyar Nrsimha. Then he went on to the Godavari river, which in his vision was the Yamuna, and the woods on its banks, Vrindavan. He joyfully crossed the river and came to the place known as Kovur, where he bathed in the river and waited there, hoping to meet Ramananda Rai. At the same time, Ramananda Rai passed by with fanfare. When he saw Mahaprabhu's supernatural form, he descended from his palanquin and paid his obeisances to the Lord. Though Mahaprabhu recognized him, he asked him to identify himself. Ramananda Rai replied that he was nothing but a lowly Shudra servant. When the Lord heard him speak in this humble manner, he immediately embraced him. Both the Lord and his servants felt the onset of divine emotions, and both experienced the 8 ecstatic transformations of prem. The Brahmanas who were accompanying Ramananda Rai were astonished to see such a display. They thought, "This sannyasi is as effulgent as the Brahman. Why is he crying while embracing this Shudra?" The governor, Ramananda Rai, is a scholar and normally very serious. Why has he suddenly become so emotional upon being touched by this sannyasi, as though intoxicated? That's Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 8, verses 26 to 27. Seeing that there were outsiders present, the Lord controlled his emotions and told Ramananda Rai that he had been told by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya to seek him out. Ramananda Rai replied with humility. One second. Okay, I'll read this part, but then I'm just going to check to see if they brought my plate downstairs so that. Okay. So Ramananda replied with humility, "This is the proof of your mercy on Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. You have touched me, an untouchable, subdued by his love for you. What difference exists between us? What a difference exists between us? You are the Supreme Lord Narayan himself, and I, a government servant interested in materialistic activities. Indeed, I am the lowest amongst men of the 4th caste. Even so, you were not contemptuous of my touch, neither did you fear the Vedic injunctions which forbid one to even look upon a Shudra. Your mercy makes you touch me. Your mercy makes you touch me, even though this activity is condemned both by scripture and by society. You are the Supreme Lord Himself, so who can understand your intention? That's from Caitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, same chapter, verses 34 to 37. Just checking the connection. Okay, it's still working. Cool. Though the Brahmanas had never shown the slightest interest in bhakti, they too were influenced by the sight of the Lord and began to chant the names of Krishna, their verses tremulous with divine ecstasy. Rāmānanda Rai said aloud that Mahaprabhu was the Supreme Lord, both in akriti, that means form, and in prakriti, in nature. The Lord immediately responded in a way that would show the greatness of his devotee. The Lord said, "You are a great devotee. Indeed, you are the best amongst them. All those who behold you are immediately affected, so their hearts melt. What to speak of others? I am a Mayavadi sannyasi, yet I feel the onset of Krishna Prem when I touch you." Same chapter, verses 44 to 45. The Lord listens to Rāmānanda speak. When Mahaprabhu told him of his desire to hear Krishna Katha from his lips, Rāmānanda Rai requested that he stay for a week or longer so that his own wicked mind would be pacified and purified. The two of them then went their way to finish their duties, returning to the same spot in the evening. Ordinarily, it is seen that a devotee asks the questions and the Lord answers. This time, however, the roles were reversed, and the Lord asked Rāmānanda to clarify certain spiritual truths, and then empowered him to respond. Krishnadas Kaviraj Gosvāmī makes this explicit in the verse which opens the 8th chapter of the Madhya Lila. Sancharya Rama Bida Bhakta Meghe Swabhakti Siddhanta Chayamritani Gaurabdiretar Amuna Vitirnais Tajgyatva Layatam Prayati. Gauranga is like the ocean of spiritual truths. He filled the cloud named Rāmānanda with the nectar of the purest conclusions of devotion to himself. Rāmānanda then rained down that same nectar on the very ocean from which it had come, producing the jewels of transcendental knowledge. That's Caitanya Charitamrita 281. A person who has not taken shelter of the Lord may try to understand the supreme truth by using empirical means, without achieving any success. Indeed, he will fall into confusion and be unable to understand the words of the Lord. Mahaprabhu asked Rāmānanda Rai to explain to him, with evidence from the scriptures, the ultimate goal of life. Okay, so I'm just checking periodically to make sure the connection is still going. Rāmānanda started his response by explaining that devotion to Vishnu is the ultimate aim of human achievement, or the sadhya. He describes the progressive path of different practices leading to that theistic goal, starting from the practice of varnashram dharma to offering the fruits of one's activities to Krishna, karmarpana, and also the renunciation of prescribed duties, karma tyag, and then devotion mixed with knowledge, jnana mishra bhakti, offering the scriptural basis for each step. Mahaprabhu rejected each proposal, however, saying that it was superficial or external, for none of these practices had the potential to achieve the pure devotion which he had come to give. By starting this conversation with Rāmānanda Rai with Varnashram Dharma, Mahaprabhu showed that all activities which ignore the Vedic principles or go against them are to be completely rejected. When responding to each of Rāmānanda Rai's suggestions, Mahaprabhu did not say, "Absolutely not." Rather, he used the words "eho bahya," this is external. The idea is that one must first give up activities which are outside the scope of the Vedic standard. Once one is fixed in these principles, one can progressively gain the qualifications to proceed through each of the various steps described by Ramananda Rai. This holds true even though bhakti itself is completely independent and may manifest in an individual through the association of saintly persons despite one's having no prior qualifications, not having gone through these prior steps. When Ramananda Rai finally answered Mahaprabhu's question by saying, pure devotional service without any tinge of speculative knowledge, that's Jnana Shunya Bhakti, saying that this Jnana Shunya Bhakti is the means to achieve the supreme perfection, then Mahaprabhu finally accepted his conclusion. So Mahaprabhu kept on saying, Eho Bahya, this is external. And then finally, when Ramananda Rai talked about Gyan Shunya Bhakti, that's bhakti that's completely devoid of any touch of Gyan, then Mahaprabhu said, Eho Hoy, and then he said, Age Kaha Ar, now speak on further. Mahaprabhu's teachings actually begin from this point on. The words Jnana Shunya are meant to completely eradicate any consciousness of the impersonal aspect of the Supreme, but not the kind of knowledge of relationships, the Sambandha Gyan, which is favorable to the attainment of pure devotional service. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes in his Amrita Pravaha Bhashya, the purport is that sacrificing the results of one's actions is better than merely engaging in one's prescribed duties according to the Varnashram Dharma. The renunciation of fruitive activities is better than simply giving up the fruits. Better than this is the cultivation of knowledge mixed with devotional service. However, despite this progressive improvement in spirituality through these stages, they are all superficial, because these four kinds of practices have no power to achieve pure devotion or Shuddha Bhakti. The devotions known as Aropsiddha means adding a devotional veneer as an afterthought to another action. Aropsiddha is like, I like to paint, and so I'm going to paint for Krishna. So you're using the things that you already like to do in service, as bhakti. So that's Aropsiddha Bhakti. It's good, but it's not pure Bhakti. You're still doing it because it's something that you like to do, rather than selflessly just doing it for Krishna's pleasure. So Aropsiddha and Sangasiddha. So what's Sangasiddha Bhakti? Sangasiddha Bhakti is devotion alloyed with fruitive activities or speculative knowledge. Those are things that are related to Bhakti but aren't actually Bhakti in itself. So like, what would that be? Isn't Sangasiddha Bhakti like different good qualities which are favorable to Bhakti but aren't Bhakti itself? They come along with Bhakti, but they aren't Bhakti itself. I don't know. That's what I thought. But anyhow. So Aropsiddha Bhakti and Sangasiddha Bhakti are never to be considered pure devotional service. Pure devotional service is Swarup Siddha Bhakti. That is, it is devotion both in form and in intent. It is entirely and eternally different from these other activities, which only have a superficial relationship to pure devotional service. The characteristics of Shuddha Bhakti are that it is activity executed uniquely for the pleasure of Krishna, devoid of any material desires. It is not hidden by the presence of fruitive intent or identification with Brahman. This is the ultimate goal of spiritual practice, for though it is seen in an aspiring devotee, it is present in its purest form when he reaches the perfection of his practice. So that is, that is from Sri Caitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 8, verse 68. Bhashya? Or is that? Anyways. Just checking to make sure the connection's still working? Okay. As long as Ramananda Rai suggested anything other than following in the footsteps of the great devotees and listening to Krishna Katha from their lips, Mahaprabhu kept saying, this is external. Therefore, it is to be understood that pure devotion starts from the moment one begins to hear about the activities and teachings of Lord Krishna from the lips of a pure devotee. From this point, Ramananda Rai described the various stages of loving devotion, the moods of neutrality, Shantaras, servitude, Dasyaras, friendship, Sakyaras, parenthood, Vatsalyaras, and conjugal love, madhur ras. From there, he went on to describe the supremacy of Radha's love, as well as both Radha and Krishna's characteristics. Then Mahaprabhu asked questions like, what is the essence of education? And what kind of fame is best for the living being? All these things have been extensively described in the 8th chapter of Chaitanya Charitamrita's Madhya Lila. In order to avoid abnormal expansion of the account of Ramananda's life, we will not go into these matters any further here. Ramananda's perception of the Lord's identity. The identity of the Lord cannot remain hidden to his devotee. Ramananda was able to recognize the Lord for who he was. He said, this is from Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, same chapter, chapter 8, verses 268 to 269. So Ramananda Rai said, first I saw you as an ordinary sannyasi. Now I see that you are actually a dark-skinned cowherd boy. I see a golden image standing in front of you. Its golden luster covers your entire body. Hari Bol, everybody. I don't know how long I cut out for. So, Hari Bol, Rup Manjari, and Rukmini Didi, and Nitai. Alright, so, I don't know where to read from. I'll just go back a little bit. So, Mahaprabhu made an effort to dismiss his identity when he heard Ramananda Rai say that you're actually a dark-skinned cowherd boy. So he tried to dismiss this by saying that Ramananda Rai was a great devotee and thus he saw Krishna everywhere. Ramananda, however, clearly stated that the primary purpose of the Lord's, he describes the primary purpose of the Lord's descent. Mahaprabhu was pleased with his insightful realization, and he displayed his form as a combination of Rasaraj, Krishna, and Mahabab, Srimati Radharani. When he saw this amazing combined form of the Lord, Ramananda Rai fell to the ground in a faint. When the Lord touched him, he regained consciousness. Ramananda Rai and the Lord remained together blissfully for 10 days before Mahaprabhu continued on his southern pilgrimage. He asked Ramananda Rai to abandon his involvement with government service and join him in Puri when he returned. When Mahaprabhu completed his travels in southern India, he met with Ramananda Rai once again on the banks of the Godavari. He showed him the 2 books, the Krishna Karnamrita and the Brahma Samhita, that he had found in his travels, and which substantiated all that Ramananda Rai had said in their previous conversations. Ramananda Rai copied the 2 manuscripts himself. The Lord remained another week with Ramananda Rai, engaging in the pleasure of discussions about Krishna before heading back to Nilachal. When Mahaprabhu expressed his desire to take Ramananda Rai along with him to Puri, he declined to go with the Lord immediately, as he was obliged to wait for the king's permission, and also would need to take care of other official affairs. He promised to join the Lord in Puri as soon as he was able. Ramananda comes to Puri. When the Lord arrived in Puri, he made his permanent residence in the house of Kashi Mishra. King Prataparudra had heard about the Lord and was very enthusiastic about meeting him. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had assured him that once the Lord had returned from his southern pilgrimage, he would somehow or other arrange for him to have his darshan. Unfortunately, no matter how hard Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya tried to convince him, the Lord insisted that he would not look upon a king. Thus, all attempts to arrange a meeting met with failure. When the king heard that Ramananda Rai wished to return to Puri in order to be close to Mahaprabhu, he was quite happy to grant him permission. He allowed him to leave his duties in the government and continued to pay him a pension. Thus, Ramananda Rai first met with the Lord in Ramananda Rai first met with the king in Katak, and then in Puri before going to Kashi Mishra's home to meet with the Lord. Ramananda Rai knew just how eager the king was to encounter Mahaprabhu, but rather than bringing up the matter directly, he simply glorified the king, telling Mahaprabhu how much faith he had in him, and how deep was his devotion to Krishna, and also how kind he had been to free Ramananda Rai from his governmental duties so that he could serve the Lord directly. By recounting the king's virtues in this way, he was able to soften the Lord's resolve. In the meantime, Nityananda Prabhu had sent one of the Lord's bahirvasas, one of the Lord's outer garments, to King Pratarparudra as a consolation. Though this gave the king a great deal of joy, his desire to meet the Lord simply increased, and he asked Ramananda Rai to intercede on his behalf and make some kind of arrangement. When Ramananda Rai finally approached the Lord directly, asking him to be compassionate toward the king, the Lord was not able to refuse him directly. He agreed that the king was no ordinary materialistic person, but nevertheless, the very title Raja was a type of contamination that he could not overlook. So he agreed to allow the king's son to come and see him, as the son and father are one. Mahaprabhu allowed the king's son to come to see him, as the son and father are one in essence. Mahaprabhu said, "The king certainly possesses all good qualities, but everything has been ruined simply by his possession of the kingly title. If you are still very eager for the king to meet with me, then you can bring me his son in his place. The scripture states that one's self extends to the son. Therefore, if his son comes, it will be equal to his meeting with me." Ramananda Rai then went to inform the king about his talks with the Lord, and, according to his request, brought the king's son to see him. That's from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 12, verses 53 to 57. Appreciating Rupa's place. Oh, I had only read the title, so you guys waited for a while. Oh, anyways, I think I'm too far to go back again. Hare Krishna, Anil ji. Okay. Appreciating Rupa's place. Rupa Manjari is the follower of the Sakis Lalita and Vishaka, who are not different from Ramananda Rai. Rupa Gosvāmī discussed the subject of his two plays, Lalit Madhav and Vidagdha Madhav, with Ramananda Rai. When Ramananda Rai asked to hear about the author's worshipable deity, Rupa Gosvāmī recited the second verse of the first act, the play's Mangalacharan. So he recited the verse, Anarpita charim chirat karunaya avatirna kalo samarpayetum unato jvala rasam sabhakti shriyam hari purata sundara dyuti kadamba sandipita sada hridaya kandare spuratu va shachinandanaha. May the Supreme Lord, who is the son of Srimati Shachi Devi, resplendent with the radiance of molten gold, be always situated in the innermost chambers of your heart. He has appeared in the age of Kali by his causeless mercy to bestow that which has never been offered before, the most sublime and radiant mellow of devotional service, the treasure of devotion to him. When Ramananda Rai heard this verse, he began to praise Rupa Gosvāmī with what seems like 1,000 tongues. He said that only Rupa Gosvāmī could have written such an accurate portrayal of such difficult concepts as a result of the Lord's mercy. Pradyumna Mishra meets Ramananda. In order to reveal the extent of Ramananda Rai's transcendental character and identity, Mahaprabhu sent Pradyumna Mishra, who was born in an upper-class Brahmin family, to Ramananda Rai to be instructed, even though Ramananda Rai was not of such a high caste. Pradyumna Mishra was born in Sylhet, but later made his permanent home in Odisha. He came one day to Mahaprabhu asking to hear some Harikatha, and Mahaprabhu sent him to meet Ramananda Rai. At that time, Ramananda Rai was in the Jagannath Ballabha gardens, engaged in preparing 2 young Devadasis for a play which was to be given before Lord Jagannath. He was engaged in bathing, dressing, and decorating them, and training them in the songs that they would sing and the dance that they would perform. The first time that Pradyumna Mishra came to see Ramananda Rai, one of his servants told him that he was busy doing this work and asked Mishra to sit outside and wait. None of Ramananda Rai's servants dared to interrupt him while he was busy preparing the performance which was to be given before Lord Jagannath. Only after he had finished the rehearsal and come outside did he learn that Pradyumna Mishra had come there to hear about Krishna from him. Ramananda Rai showed the Brahmin the appropriate respect and begged forgiveness for the long delay. Mishra realized that it was too late that day for his wish to be fulfilled, and so he returned home. Some days later, when Mahaprabhu saw Mishra, he asked him how the meeting with Ramananda Rai had gone and what topics they had discussed. Pradyumna Mishra told him everything that had happened and told the Lord that some doubts had risen in his mind about Ramananda Rai's activities. The Lord immediately took steps to erase these doubts from the Brahman's mind. He began to glorify Ramananda Rai's extraordinary character with great force. He said, "I am a sannyasi, and I consider myself to be renounced. But if I even hear the name of a woman, what to speak of seeing one, I feel an effect on my mind and body. So who is not moved by the sight of a woman? Listen to me, everyone. Let me tell you about Ramananda Rai's activities, even though they are so wonderful and uncommon that they really cannot be properly described. Ramananda Rai personally serves Lord Jagannath's young and beautiful Devadasis in every possible way. He personally bathes and dresses them and decorates them with ornaments. While doing so, he naturally sees and touches their bodies. But even so, his mind is never affected. He teaches the girls how to physically express all the moods of love so that they can act them out before Jagannath Dev. But his mind and body are as steady as wood or stone. Indeed, it is amazing that even when he touches such young girls, his mind is not disturbed. Only Ramananda has the right to do such things, and when I see him do them, I can understand that his body is not material, but has been completely transformed into a spiritual entity." That's from Caitanya Charitamrita Antilila, chapter 5, verses 35 to 42. Mahaprabhu thus revealed Ramananda Rai's amazing powers to Pradyumna Mishra, and through him to the world. He told Pradyumna that he himself went to Ramananda Rai to hear about Krishna, and advised him to go a second time. This time, Pradyumna was able to hear Ramananda Rai speak about Krishna in such depth and with such insight that he was astonished. So astonished, in fact, that he began to dance in ecstasy. Bhaktivinoda Thakur has written the following comment on the above pastime. One second. Okay. Rai Ramananda had composed a play known as Jagannath Vallabha Natak. This play was performed in the Jagannath temple for his pleasure. Rai Ramananda trained 2 Devadasi girls, or virgins of God. And in parentheses it says, in Odisha, they are now called Maharis. So Ramananda Rai trained these 2 Devadasis on how to play the emotions appropriate to the gopis in his drama. Since the 2 Devadasis were playing the roles of chief gopis, Ramananda Rai made no distinction between them and Krishna's beloved mistresses. It's saying the roles of the two chief gopis. I wonder if that's Lalita and Vishaka. Because that would be very appropriate if Ramananda Rai is teaching them how to be Lalita or Vishaka. He considered himself to be their maidservant, and in that spiritual identity, engaged in their service by teaching them to dance and sing for their Lord. Because Ramananda Rai knew himself to be one of Srimati Radharani's handmaidens, he was able to project the identity of his worshipable mistress on the two Devadasis, and this is why he was able to serve them in this most intimate fashion without experiencing the disturbance of mundane sexual desire. That's from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Amrita Pravaha Bhashya, Antya 5, verse 20. Though a householder, Ramananda Rai is not under the control of the 6 deadly sins: lust, anger, greed, illusion, pride, and malice. Though a so-called materialistic person, he is qualified to instruct those in the renounced order of life. The Lord wished to reveal these qualities of Ramananda Rai, and so he sent Pradyumna Mishra to listen to him speak about Krishna. The Lord knows very well how to make his devotees' virtues public. He considers it to be his personal profit to do so by using various strategies. O devotees, listen carefully to yet another of the Lord's characteristics. He manifests his own majestic nature, though this is usually hidden. He spreads real religious principles through a man from the lowly Shudra class in order to vanquish the false pride of so-called renunciates and learned scholars. He preached about devotional service, ecstatic love of the absolute truth, by making Ramananda Rai, a grihasta born in a low family, the speaker. The Lord made him the speaker, while he himself, an exalted Brahman sannyasi, and Pradyumna Mishra, a pure Brahman, while they both listened and took lessons from him. Sorry, I read that. Anyways, you get what it was saying. That's from Caitanya Charitamrita, Antya Lila, chapter 5, verses 80 to 85. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Gosvāmī Thakur Prabhupada comments on these words from Sri Caitanya Charitamrita as follows. To materialistic vision, Ramananda Rai is a grihasta on the pravritti marg, engaged in an active life in the world, and not as a self-controlled brahmachari, vanaprastha, or sannyasi. A materialistic householder is under the control of his senses, and this is the basis of his involvement in worldly activities. A Vaishnava householder who has attained the transcendental state, however, a Vaishnava householder who has attained the transcendental state, however, is not at all on the same level, transcending the influences of the 6 deadly sins and standing aloof from the influence of the senses. Ramananda Prabhu accepted the householder state as his role in the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Ordinary materialistic persons look upon him from a perspective that is tinted by their own desire for sense gratification, and thus consider him to be one of their own. But in fact, his mind had been totally spiritualized through being fixed on the supreme worshipable object. He was thus a Krishna Vishai, one who seeks only the pleasure of Krishna's senses and not his own. He was not an impersonalist or an argumentative nihilist opposed to the Lord's transcendental activities. Indeed, he possessed the power to transform the minds of such sannyasis who had abandoned sense gratification and were absorbed in the undifferentiated Brahman without any appreciation for Krishna's form and pastimes, and turn them away from their fundamentally materialistic conception of transcendence, attracting them to the practice of devotional service through hearing and chanting about Krishna's name, form, and activities. Okay. Other activities in Puri. When Ballabha came to Puri and into contact with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Lord kept his own glories hidden from him because he knew him to be proud of his learning. He knew Ballabha was proud of his learning. The Lord thus preferred to speak to Ballabha about the qualifications of his entourage. At that time, he said of Ramananda Rai that he was expert in both the Sambandha, or knowledge of the relationships between God and the living entities, and the Prayojan Tattva, or knowledge of the highest goal of life. Furthermore, he indicated that he was the greatest connoisseur of the pure and sacred raptures of Vrindavan. This is a quote from Caitanya Charitamrita, Antya Lila, chapter 7, verse 23. Mahaprabhu said, Ramananda Rai is the treasure house of divine sentiments. It was he who disclosed to me that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. No one can fully describe the extent of Ramananda's spiritual power. Through him, I was able to learn about the pure moods of the devotees of Braj. And now, here's a quote from the previous chapter, chapter 6, verse 9. Ramananda Rai had the same type of relationship with Mahaprabhu that Subal, Krishna's friend and helper, used to have in Braj. Now, same Antya Lila, chapter 11, verse 50. This is a quote from that. Ramananda Rai was also present in Nilachal when Haridas Thakur passed away. Mahaprabhu praised Haridas Thakur before the devotees, led by Ramananda Rai and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Okay, now we come to the last section, I think. Ramananda during the Lord's separation pangs. When Mahaprabhu spent most of his time in a condition of divine ecstatic madness, he would sometimes disappear from his chambers, even 3 bars to pass in order to go outside. Once he was found near the Lion's Gate, the Singhadwar, his joints loosened and taking on a giant distended form. So all his joints were separated. He was revived and returned to normal by the loud singing of the holy names. On another occasion, he was found in the Chatak Parvat, which he had taken in his state of trance to be Govardhan. Once again, he had to be pacified by Sankirtan and returned to his home. On these occasions, Ramananda Rai was present with Swarup Damodar. Throughout the 10 transformations of the Lord's ecstatic madness, the Lord's Divyonmad, Ramananda Rai would recite verses that would fit the Lord's emotional state. In this way, he brought Mahaprabhu pleasure. This is from Antya Lila chapter 6, verse 6. When the Lord acutely felt pangs of separation from Krishna, only Śrī Ramananda Rai's talks about Krishna and the sweet songs of Swarup Damodar kept him alive. And now the following will be a quote from chapter 15 of Antya Lila, verses 24 to 27. The Lord took Swarup Damodar and Ramananda Rai by the shoulders and said, "Listen, Swarup and Rama Rai. Tell me, what should I do? Where should I go in order to find Krishna? You can tell me the best thing to do." In this way, Gauranga would tell his tale of woe to Swarup Damodar and Ramananda, and they would console him in his grief. Swarup would sing, and Ramananda would recite Sanskrit verses, giving joy to the Lord with poems from Krishna Karnamrita, the songs of Vidyapati, and Gita Govinda. Now this is Madhya, chapter 2, verse 77 of Caitanya Charitamrita. Remaining in the company of Swarup and Ramananda both day and night, Mahaprabhu ecstatically relished the songs of Chandidas and Vidyapati and Rai's plays, as well as Krishna Karnamrita and Gita Govinda. Ramananda Rai performed his bhajan in the Jagannath Vallabha garden, a place that was very dear to Mahaprabhu also. As soon as the Lord entered this garden, he would be overwhelmed by feelings of divine love. One day, while the Lord was there, he had a vision of Krishna under an ashok tree. Then the vision was suddenly lost to him, and Mahaprabhu fell to the ground in a faint. Now, what we're reading is from Caitanya Charitamrita, Antya Lila, chapter 19, verses 79 to 80. The main park in Puri is the Jagannath Vallabha garden. The Lord entered there with his devotees. The trees and flower bushes were in bloom, as though it was Vrindavan. The parrots, minna birds, and cuckoos were singing their songs, and the bees were all buzzing.
Wandering through the garden, he went from tree to tree. When he came to an Ashoka tree, he suddenly saw Krishna standing there. The Lord started to run towards him, but Krishna laughed at him and disappeared. The Lord was stunned. He had found Krishna and then had lost him again. He lost consciousness and fell to the ground. That's Chaitanya Charitamrita Antilila chapter 19 verses 85 to 87. Through Rāmānanda Rāya and Śrī Swarup Damodar Gosvāmī, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu joyfully announced to the world that Harinam Sankirtan is the best means to attain love of God in this age of quarrel. And then in the last chapter of Chaitanya Charitamrita, chapter 20, verse 8, this is a quote from that. The Lord, in a wave of jubilation, said, "Listen, Swarup Damodar and Rāmānanda Rāya. In the age of Kali, Harinam Sankirtan is a supreme means of deliverance." There are two opinions about Rāmānanda Rāya's disappearance day. Some people say Jesht Krishna Panchami, and others say Vaishak Krishna Panchami. And right now it's Vaishak Krishna Panchami, isn't it? So I guess that's what we accept. So, okay, it's now 8:30. Rohit Radhakrishnan Prabhu just said that Shri Jagannath Vallabh Natak by Śrī Rāmānanda Rāya is a noteworthy play where two Sakis, Madanika and Shashimukhi, arranged the meeting of Radharani and Shri Krishna. Okay, so those are the two Sakis that Rāmānanda Rāya was training. I mean, they were acting as those two Sakis, Madanika and Shashimukhi. Wow, very interesting. All right, so there is, maybe we could just end with singing a song from, written by Rāmānanda Rāya, Kalayati Nayanam. And then, yeah, we'll end there. Let me just find it. Where is it? It's in proofreading. Sanskrit section. All right. Sorry, just give me 1 second to load this. Kalayati Nayanam. Okay, I don't have a mridanga or anything, so I'm just going to sing it. I'll read the translation and then we can sing it. Radha's eyes glance in every direction, appearing like a lotus moving in a gentle breeze. As Radha enters the pastime forest, Kamadev arises and obstructs her at every step. Her steps are slow and gentle, like the graceful gait of an elephant. May these words spoken by the poet Rāmānanda Rāya bring happiness to Gajapati Mahārāja Prataparudra. Akalayati nayanam Dishi dishi valitam Pankajamiva mridu maruta chalitam Keli vipinam pravishati radha Pratipada samudita Pratipada samudita manasija bada Kalayati nayanam Dishi dishi valitam Pankam jamiva mridu maruta chalitam Vinidadati mridu mantarapadam Rachayati kunjara gatimanuvadam Kalayati nayanam Dishi dishi valitam
pankajamiva mridu maruta chalitam janayati rudra gajadipamoditam Rāmānanda Rāya Kavigaditam Kalayati Nayanam Deshi Deshi Valitam Pankajamiva Mridu Maruta Chalitam Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Jaya Radhe, Jaya Krishna, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Krishna, Jaya Lalita Devi, Jaya Vishaka Devi, Lalita Devi, Jaya Vishaka Devi, Jaya Shachi Nandan, Gora Hari, Shachi Nandan, Jaya Gora Hari, Jaya Sarup Damodar, Jaya Ramananda Rai, Jaya Sarup Damodar, Jaya Ramananda Rai, Jaya Guru Deva, Guru Deva, Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Jai Shri Sachinandan Gaur Hari Ki Jai, Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Ju Ki Jai, Jai Srila Gurudev Ki Jai, Jai Srila Param Gurudev Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Shri Rupanuga Gauriya Guru Varga Ki Jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai, Shri Giriraj Maharaj Ki Jai, Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai, Śrī Rāmānanda Rai Ki Jai, Tadīya Shubha Tirabhav Titi Ki Jai, Śrīla Bhakti Ballabha Tīrtha Gosvāmī Mahārāja Ki Jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol, Vrindai Tulsi Devai Priyai Keshavashacha, Krishna Bhakti Pradadevi Sattvatai Namo Namaha, Vancha Kalpatarubhyashcha Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Dandavat pranams everybody, and thanks for waiting for me when I cut out for that middle in between. I'm going to try to pre-record the Srimad Bhagavatam reading today so that we don't have to worry about the video getting cut out. Yeah, alright, thanks so much for joining, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Do you want to see where I'm staying? I'll also show you Dadu. That's I lived with him in Jagannath Puri for about 6 years. He was the pujari there. He did everything himself. Even though he was so old, he did all the pujari seva himself, and at that time, the kitchen was on the bottom floor, and the temple room was on the 4th floor, like on the roof. And so he would walk up and down the stairs how many times a day? So many times a day, because he was the only pujari. He did everything by himself. And he managed to chant 64 rounds a day while doing all that puja. And so I'm just showing you, this is our Dadu. Sabai apnake dekhte chai, Dadu. There's Dadu. Now he chants every day 2 lakhs Harinam. And there's Subhasaka Brahmachari. And yeah. And this is where I'm staying in
Bhaman Gosvāmī Gaudiya Math. It's just right outside a gas station. See, there's a gas station. And there's the main road. Yeah. Anyhow. All right. Kishore, I am in Kolkata, Manaktala, in the Bhaman Gosvāmī Gaudiya Math. I'm here for I don't know how long. So, all right. I'll see you all tomorrow. Jai Shri Radhe. Hare Krishna. Ha.